Well, I thought this day would never come, but here we are. Over the course of the last couple of years, I've received thousands of comments telling me that I'm not open-minded to VR. A lot of people have actually told me to just buy a headset, experiment with it, to just get a chance to understand it and get past the motion sickness phase, and so I decided to finally do it. Recently, they were having a big sale on Amazon where you could get a PsVR and a couple of games for $100, and I decided to pick one up. Mostly because Sony has been pretty clear that with the PlayStation 5, they want VR to be a big aspect of it. So basically what I want to try and do is see if VR still sucks. In 2019, is this something that you can actually get into if you're just a normal hardcore gamer? Now let me just be clear, everything I'm playing in this video, I wanted to try and find everything I could play with just a normal controller, not the stuff that requires the motion controllers, because while those are interesting, and I did buy those some as well, I basically want to find the stuff that will be the closest to just a standard gaming experience, but with a headset. Alright, with that being said, let's dive into it. When most of us think about virtual reality before we try it, we oftentimes imagine the really gimmicky stuff. Things like riding a roller coaster and screaming at all the twists and turns, or playing a horror game and monsters keep jumping up to yell in your face. When in actuality, perhaps what surprised me the most about PsVR is the fact that it's actually quite standard. I mean, yes, there are things like cool racing games and freaking spaceship simulators, and of course things like Resident Evil, but beyond this, there's also just a lot of stuff that feels like a normal game, except through a visor. Like, let me just talk about one of the ones that really impressed me the most, which is Moss. So as you can see, this is just a cute little adventure game where I'm actually controlling this tiny little mouse with a sword. Now what's interesting about this that you'll notice is that I'm just playing the game. Yes, I have the headset on, but it actually just feels like I am inside of the TV screen. I'm able to go around and solve puzzles. I'm actually able to use my controller and physically reach into the universe and move objects around to help my character. But what's really most interesting is that all of this feels so immediately natural. I mean, a lot of times when you're in a real life situation, you're trying to react to the stimuli around you. If you see a delicious hamburger and nobody's claimed it, you want to pick it up and eat it. If someone's running at you and you're scared, you're going to automatically raise your hands to defend yourself. VR is surprisingly very reliant on natural instincts in a way that I never could have predicted. Now, something about this that's definitely my favorite is the fact that a lot of times when I was playing PsVR, even though these graphics probably don't look the best on your screen, or if you're watching this on a cell phone, when you actually have the visor on, this stuff seems like real life. Yes, I'm being completely serious about that, which is that if all the stimulation you're getting visually is 100% of your eyeballs, it actually tricks your brain into thinking it's real. Now, obviously, I know that this is a video game, I'm not just having a crazy hallucination, but it genuinely feels like I am in this universe. Like, at one point, I was playing this horror game called Here They Lie, and I was actually in this big opened up city portion, and I'm just kind of wandering around, and I'm sure that there's monsters that are supposed to spook me at some point. But what's really cool is that as I was walking along, there's all this just really gorgeous detail of just cups on tables, this really creepy air of abandonedness to everything. And I saw this balcony and all these birds flying past. And instinctually, I actually walked up to the edge of the balcony and looked off into the streets below. And it was one of those things where it so completely fooled my brain into thinking this is real. Like right now, even looking at this footage, it's actually strange to see my physical body there because in my brain, I have memories of actually walking through these streets. Now, I do want to say, not every game is trying to be first person, and I think that I actually think I enjoy the games more that try and do stuff a little bit differently. A lot of stuff tries to do things like, well, let's just look at this racing game for a second. So if you grew up in the 90s, I'm sure you had one of those little race tracks there. There's like a remote control car and you basically pull the trigger to make the car drive around the track. Well, this is basically that, but in VR, and it's sort of a needless experience. I'll be honest that this is one that I typically wouldn't play a lot of, but I do think that it is a fascinating experiment. Basically, as I'm here, I actually am forced to tilt my head to see all of this winding track, diving into the ocean, coming up, trying to drift around that next turn. And it's something that I think is an interesting idea, and definitely it doesn't immerse my mind as much, but I think I enjoy the view of it more. You get more of a chance to actually absorb your surroundings and stuff when you can sit back and watch it. So like at one point, my fiance saw me with the headset on for a couple hours and she was like, hey, let me give it a shot. So she starts playing it, and what was really interesting is getting to sit to the side and actually watch her in real life and the gameplay on screen. I could see her physical reaction to the digital stimulus. Like one of the things that was really interesting is at this part there's like a really long intro and she's sinking down this elevator, and I noticed that she was just kind of sitting there and enjoying the view. I mean, this place is not real, but to her eyes and to her mind, this is real. She ended up just sitting there and petting our cat as she watched all this stuff unfold in front of her, and it was such an interesting thing. She ended up going through this entire demo and solving all the puzzles and stuff, and afterward I asked her, okay babe, you don't really play a lot of VR, you're just a normal hardcore gamer, what did you think of it? And she described it as the ultimate graphics. Since this is your entire vision, it feels like the real world on your eyeballs. And that's what's great, is that even though this doesn't have the greatest graphics, and this is obviously just like a tiny little demo, you still get tricked into thinking that this stuff is better looking than it actually is. Despite the fact that this has like a cartoonish art style, it still seems real. Now there's some stuff that's actually part of PsVR that I just don't think is necessary. One of the main ones that a lot of people told me to try out is Tetris Effect, and I did. Now, I love Tetris Effect. It was actually one of my very favorite games of last year, but why would I want a headset for this? I do think that there is a little bit of a weird thing where some games just want to try and throw in crazy, cool, sparkly effects and nice, big, flashy things, but it doesn't really add to the experience. To me personally, stuff like this is just, it's needless. I guess what really kind of tickles me the most is the focused VR experiences. Times where I'm able to just put on the headset and see something that in my opinion would not work in a standard video game. There's something that I've heard a lot of people refer to as the Mario 64 moment of VR, which sounds really dramatic, but what they mean by that is it is a game that seems to explain VR and utilize VR in a way that nobody else has yet, and that's Astro Bot. Now on the surface, this does appear to just be a standard platformer, but it does go beyond that because it uses a lot of physical tricks. So basically, I do just have like a punch button and a jump button, and I can hover if I actually hold the jump button, but what's most fascinating about this is that this game actually requires you move around the room to a small extent. Like there will be puzzles where there's something behind a ledge, and the only way to see where I'm going is to literally lean my body forward and look behind it. And even now, just sitting here and seeing this footage again, it seemed like I was doing that. It seemed like I was actually going around and helping my little Astrobot buddy by being his eyes when he couldn't do it. And not to mention that this game is super, super fun. I mean, by far, this is my favorite VR game, and it's something that doesn't just have spooky monsters or whatever. It's just this. It's just a platformer, but it's so freaking appealing. It manages to be exuberant and awesome, and what's kind of special is that I don't think that this game would be fun without my VR headset. I think that this is fun because I am in the world with my Astrobot buddies. I'm actually taking part in the universe and assisting them in a way that I could only do if I was a giant goggle-wearing person like I am in this universe. Now, the last game I want to talk about is what I think is considered the highest-selling PSVR game, which is Resident Evil 7. So all of RE7 actually has a completely existing game mode. You could play through the entire game from start to finish, every level, every boss, everything with the VR headset. And it does feel fundamentally different. Basically, you actually aim your gun by tilting your head, which sounds like it would be a little bit clunky, but is actually super, super smooth. It's nice to be able to have such a immediate interface. But I think it does come to the problem of I did find myself having a little bit of troubles physically. Something about trying to wear a headset for hours and hours and hours when playing games like this, it ends up creating this, I would almost call it a brain fog. By shutting off all the outside stimulation, I did find myself becoming a little bit dulled to the experience. There's something about the fact that when I sit down and play games, I want to be able to see the sunlight coming through the blinds, I want to be able to see the screen, I want to be able to pause it and go take a drink or eat a sandwich. When you're in VR, you are only in VR. You cannot really interact with the real world at all, and I do think that in a game like Resident Evil 7 that is so heavy and immersive, it does feel to be a bit much. I could actually only stand this for about 30 minutes to an hour at a time, and yes, I'm being serious, it was just that short of a window that I could stand it before I just found myself being mentally overwhelmed and needing to take almost a breather break and remove the headset and play on a standard mode. The other major issue I've had with PsVR is that the setup is ridiculous. Like, what you're seeing here is all of the wires that are actually required for me to record this. There are 4 separate HDMIs, there's cables that run from the headset to the special breaker box. The breaker box needs to plug into the front of your PlayStation 4, then the wires go back to the headset. There is so much complicated, intricate wiring, along with the fact that you need to perfectly set up your PlayStation camera to aim at the center of the room, and then sometimes the game will repeatedly ask you to get back in front of the camera and resync it. It's just one of those things where I feel like the setup time for this is too much. If you're a hardcore PsVR gamer, you probably keep your headset up just all the time, but for me personally, I'm probably going to unhook this as soon as I'm done with the video. Next time there's like a big PsVR game, I'll put this stuff back up, but right now, it's just one of those things where it's too much. I'll probably actually hook it up again because I want to beat Astrobot, but once I'm done with that, I don't think I'm going to be putting this back together. It's just too much. It feels to me like I'm having to connect an entire Lego set every time I want to play one level of a game, and to me, that is too much work for such little payoff. Overall, I do think that this is an interesting experiment, and I really have to actually congratulate Sony for pulling this off. This is so cheap, it is such an affordable range, and the experiences are just so accessible that genuinely I can say that I was wrong to just think that VR was nothing but really silly goofiness. This really does have the potential to possibly be something that could be taken very, very seriously very, very soon. So this has just been my thoughts on the PlayStation VR. What do you think of it? Is this something that could really be the wave of the future, or is this just a limited gimmick? I feel like the potential of this is very, very high, but simultaneously, it still seems so niche. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the video itself that I do want to point out is the fact that I actually did get very, very bad motion sickness for a couple days after playing with this. Basically, each day I was trying to play this for a couple hours, but I would eventually hit my limit, where my brain just could not take any more simulated motion. It seems like the more stuff tries to fly in your face, like if there's fire effects or too much blood spatter on the screen, it would trigger it even faster. So I just want to make it a heads up and say, look, no matter how much you actually love VR, you're going to have to build up what they like to call VR legs, an immunity to motion sickness. But if you can get past that, this really could be the wave of the future, possibly. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Alright, I'm probably going to put this in my closet now because as cool as this thing is, the setup is too freaking arduous. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.